Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really provocative idea from the writer Matthew Bock-Côté. He argues that the Western world, well, it isn't a single unified civilization anymore. Instead, he believes it's actually fractured into two fundamentally different competing societies. So let's explore what he means by that.
In this quote right here, it frames his whole argument with a super powerful analogy. He's not just talking about political disagreements. No, he's suggesting a split as deep as the one that divided East and West Germany. We're talking two distinct entities with totally opposing worldviews, living right alongside each other.
So, if the West is divided, where exactly are the fault lines? Well, according to the source, this conflict isn't just happening in one place. It cuts across the very foundations of Western society.
Bock-Côté argues the split is happening everywhere, right down to the basics. For this explainer, we're going to zero in on two of the biggest fractures he talks about, the political and the economic. And these aren't just minor policy debates, They represent two completely different visions for what a society should even be.
Okay, let's jump into that first major fracture, the political one. The source material actually traces this conflict back more than 3 decades to a really pivotal moment in modern history.
So this timeline really shows the whole arc. It starts with what's described as a kind of marginal populist revolt against the globalist consensus that came after 1989. And over the decades, it's moved from being on the edges of the Western world right into its political center. It's a force that just can't be ignored anymore.
And this brings us to the core political fight. On one side, you have a vision that's all about the direct, sovereign will of the people. But on the other side, you have a vision that emphasizes the rule of law, using all these institutional and legal frameworks to contain what it sees as dangerous or extreme populist movements.
To push back against this populist tide, Bock-Côté argues the establishment is building what he calls a new digital and legal Berlin Wall. Now, the idea here is that instead of concrete, this wall is made out of rules, regulations, and institutional power, all designed to limit the reach of these movements. And he points to a few specific examples of this so-called lockdown. Things like legally preventing future governments from holding referendums. We're trying to ban opposition parties. We're using administrative decisions to shut down media outlets. And even closing the bank accounts of ideological opponents.
Okay, next up, let's look at that second major divide, the economic chasm. And this is all about property, wealth, and the really fundamental role of the state in our financial lives.
The source argues that we're seeing the return of what it calls the collectivist hypothesis. Basically, it's an idea that challenges the principles of private property and free enterprise. Instead, it favors state planning and control, but it often comes under these modern banners like fiscal justice or ecological regulation.
This whole economic divide, it really boils down to one simple but pretty profound question. When you earn money, who does it actually belong to? This quote from Bock-Côté is really blunt, but it definitely captures his argument. He's claiming that the state is increasingly working from the idea that all income is its resource by default, and whatever you get to keep is just what it decides to leave you. And to underscore just how hot this debate around taxes is, a caller into the radio show where this analysis comes from cited this figure. They claimed that in France, less than half of all households, just 48%, actually pay any income tax, which concentrates the burden on a much smaller group. The source also points out what it sees as a complete reversal of logic when it comes to budgeting. You know how a person or a family figures out their expenses first and then finds the income to cover them? Well, the state, as it's described here, does the exact opposite. It first figures out its maximum possible income through taxes and only then decides how to spend it.
So if these deep political and economic cracks are real, what does the future of the West actually look like? I mean, where are we all headed from here?
Bock-Côté's analysis really suggests the West is at a crossroads, with two paths that just can't be taken at the same time. The first path goes back to a collection of sovereign nations, driven by popular will and economic freedom. The second path, though, leads toward a post-national order managed by a class of experts and institutions.
And this brings us to the final really provocative question of this whole analysis. This issue is so much bigger than who wins the next election. It's asking whether these two fundamentally different Wests can even coexist, or if the friction between them is just destined to define the future of our societies.